Hey guys, what's up? In today's video, I'm going to be answering your questions about what it's like to live in Poland as an American. These are questions you have asked me on my last Ask Me Anything video, so I got your questions straight from there. So before I get into the questions, I just want to give you a little backstory on how I ended up living in Poland in the first place. So one of the reasons is that my husband is Polish. I left the States in 2015 to start traveling nomadically, living out of a backpack, and my first destination was Scotland. So I met Kuba there, and about a year later we got married. So in that time, I was traveling around Europe by myself. We got married, we started traveling around, we bought a van, converted it, traveled around with the van, and then we came back to Poland to settle for the time being, so we built this tiny house in Missouri, and that's where we are today. So I've been living outside of the States since December of 2015. For the time spent in Poland, it's been just under 2 years. We spent a year living in Krakow. We rented a flat there. We started building our house this past summer, and before that, I was in Poland for a couple months when we were building the van, or maybe it was a month or so, and then I visited Poland when Kuba and I were dating for a couple weeks. So yeah, it's been just under 2 years, if my math is correct, and if I didn't forget any other trips to Poland that I took. It gets a little confusing because I've been traveling since I left the States, going around Europe. I applied for a temporary residency permit when we lived in Krakow, because you might not know, just because I'm married to Kuba and he's Polish, that doesn't give me a legal right to live in the country. The same applies to him. Just because we're married, he's married to an American, that doesn't mean he can just go to the States whenever he wants. He can't just move there. There is paperwork involved to make that happen. I have a temporary residency permit that allows me to stay in Poland until 2022. I can choose to apply for a permanent residency permit, and then after that, it's citizenship if I choose to apply for it. But I'll cross that bridge when we get to it. Some of the questions are dealing with that and whether I'm going to do it or not, so I'll get into that later. Now, even though I'm living in Poland now, we built this tiny house, I want you to keep in mind that as a full-time YouTuber, I'm not actually working in Poland. All of my money is earned online, and I do have permanent residency in the States. So my experiences when it comes to living in Poland are going to be much different from someone who, let's say, relocates to Poland for a job. They have a visa to work in Poland or something like that, or someone who permanently relocates here. So I consider myself still a tourist because I'm not earning money in Poland. I'm living here on a temporary residency permit. So it's just a little tricky because I am living here and I'm spending time here, and I'm going to be living in this tiny house for the next 5 years or so, or even longer, but the situation is different. So I'm just going to be speaking from my experience as what it's like to live here and just sharing that with you, answering the questions. Anyways, let's get into your questions. How do you like living in Poland? Well, I enjoy it very much. I'm happy to live in this tiny house here with my husband and our dog Aika, who is sleeping behind me. We just went out for a walk, so now it's nap time. I really like that Poland grows a lot of produce, so we can always find good quality produce at the shops that are grown in Poland, so they don't have to travel far. A lot of stuff is also made in Poland, so even at Castorama, which is that's Home Depot or Lowe's, a lot of the stuff is made in Poland. It's nice to know that when you buy stuff here, it's actually made here and produced here, and it supports the local economy. Poland's a beautiful country. Everything I've seen in Poland has been really nice. The cities and the more rural parts, and then the mountains. The trains here, they're well connected. You can go almost anywhere by train. I am happy to live in a country where there's an abundance of water, and the water here is clean and safe to drink. We have a hookup to the city's water line, and we can pretty much use it as much as we want. We just have to pay for it. So it's different from other countries where there's a severe drought going on or water usage has to be monitored strictly. I just feel very lucky to live in a place where we actually have clean drinking water and we can use it whenever we want, and there is no shortage of water here. So it's very important to me. But yeah, I'd say we're happy to live here. And we wouldn't have built this house in Poland if we didn't want to live here semi-long term. We're just appreciative that our friend Bartik let us build this house on his property. That's really why we ended up in Poland. It was just by chance that Kuba's friend Bartik had this land and that he's totally chill with us living here, so that's how it worked out. I wonder how you find the political situation in Poland. Does it not bother you to live in a country where hunting's allowed, public TV is in total control of the government, the forests in the country are being destroyed? I live here and it absolutely scares me, so I guess in general I'm curious why you live in Poland. So when we came up with the idea of building our tiny house, we didn't consider like the political situation in Poland as one of the factors, honestly. It just happened that our friend Bartik has land here in a beautiful part of Poland, so that's why we decided to build the house and stay here. And I really don't want to talk about politics on this channel. I also don't feel like I have a right to really voice those opinions because I am just a tourist here. I mean, I'm staying here permanently. I have that residency permit, but I'm not working in Poland, so me voicing my opinion about the government here, I feel like it's kind of strange to do that. And like even with US politics, I feel strange criticizing what's going on there because I'm not actually there. I spend the majority of my time outside of the US, so like what right do I have to actually criticize what's going on? You know, living in this tiny house, we're pretty insulated from what's actually happening in the real world, and there's pros and cons to that. So at some point we might decide to move because of the political situation here, but we'll figure that out later. For now, we're happy living here in our tiny house. They just want to know about my experiences living in a country where I don't speak the language. Do you feel removed from the culture? How do you communicate feelings and sense of humor with people? I have lots of experience visiting and living in countries where I don't speak the language, and to me, I'm completely used to that. It doesn't bother me at all to not hear English at all when I'm walking around. I actually prefer to be immersed in a foreign language instead, because then I don't hear all of this like chatter. I can actually like listen to Polish and try to figure out what people are saying, so I'm learning it that way. So do I feel removed from the culture? I'm not Polish, so I'm different than someone who was born here. I feel like I can communicate fine with people who speak another language, and I mean, since I've been traveling, in the majority of the countries I visited, I didn't speak that language, so I just got by learning the basic phrases. I don't really have any deep conversations with people who live here. As I mentioned in another video, I'm introverted, so like I really don't like chit-chatting with people. So yeah, this question's difficult for me to answer because I don't like go to meetups looking to like meet locals. I'm just not that type of person. So like when we're walking around, you know, we can greet people and say hi and whatever, but I'm not having like intense conversations with people. Maybe I was talking to people more when I was traveling around by myself, but now that just doesn't really happen. What parts of your identity have you had to question or really reconsider because of living in a different country? And I'm not really sure how to answer this one either, because I don't view myself as like an American just because that's where I was born. I don't have an identity as an American. So me living in Poland, I would be the same person as if I were living in Croatia or Spain or France or the UK or even in the States. So, I'm not really sure how to answer that question either. Over time, I've become more comfortable with being like immersed in a different language, a different culture. The more I travel, the more I start to notice the similarities among them, and there really aren't many differences. You see more similarities than differences. Will you get your Polish citizenship, and if you do, will you keep your American citizenship? I am not sure if I'm going to apply for Polish citizenship. Part of me thinks I would, but then the other part of me, I don't even know, like, do I need that? Would I want it? I have no idea. We'll just see a few years down the road if I want to apply for that, and if I do, then I will apply and see what happens. If I get it, I'm definitely going to keep my American one too. There's no reason for me to give that up. I would like to know how much Polish you can speak and whether you have plans to become more fluent now that you are a permanent resident. I am not fluent in Polish. I can understand a lot, so when we are out and people are talking, I can understand almost everything they are saying. I just cannot respond in Polish. So usually I can respond in English, or I'll tell Kuba, like, oh, I understood, and I can respond in English. To me, when it comes to learning a language, the most difficult part is like creating those sentences and those phrases. So for me, I can't do that yet. I know basic phrases like dzień dobry, dziękuję, do widzenia, tak, nie, nie wiem, nie rozumiem, nie mówię po polsku, what else? Przepraszam. I feel like I'm pretty good with numbers too, so in the shops, when they're telling me how much money I owe, like at the till, I like purposely won't look at the register so I can like hear the numbers and then give the money out. So I'm pretty good with that. But yeah, I'm still at the stage where it's like, I know a lot of vocabulary. Like I can read stuff in Polish, like on websites, on OLX, in the shops. I can read and understand a lot. I'm not at that point yet where I can like be creating those sentences, and that'll just come with time. And do I have plans to be more fluent? I do, but I am not in a rush to be completely fluent because Kuba, he's a native Polish speaker. If he preferred to speak in Polish, I would probably be fluent already. But since we met, he prefers to talk in English, so we just speak English at home. So we might start doing lessons in Polish or whatever, but I've been studying Polish since we met in 2016. If I am going to apply for citizenship, then I will have to be fluent to take the exam, but I'm not concerned about that. And honestly, I'm totally fine going around, going shopping, walking around, interacting with people in Polish. It's totally fine. So it's not like I have to have Kuba with me when I'm out and about. I can totally understand people. Part of that just comes from all of the practice I've had, like visiting foreign countries, so I just learn what to look for. Like when you're interacting with someone, I can guess what they're saying. And if you know some vocabulary, to me it's not hard to figure out what people are trying to ask you. But I enjoy learning foreign languages, so to me it's exciting to live in a country where I don't speak the language and I can learn it and acquire it that way. It is tricky for me though because I have studied several other languages, so Spanish was the first one and then it's Arabic. So when I am learning Polish or trying to create sentences in Polish, my brain always reverts to Spanish and Arabic. I am going to be here for a few years, so I can't see why I wouldn't learn it to fluency, but we'll see. Like, I'm sorry it's so boring here. She's like, oh, quit talking. Oh. Have you noticed a difference in the numbers of your neighbors who can speak English compared to when you were in the city? Here, we don't really have neighbors. Most of the houses here are like holiday homes, so right now no one's living in them. Smelling. We have chatted to a few people, and they do know some English, but it's not like in Krakow where you would hear English more often. There were lots of tourists visiting Krakow, so the fact that someone was speaking English wasn't such a surprise. But like here, when we go to the shop, the second I start talking, everyone turns around to see who's talking. It's also interesting because I am seriously the only non-white person here. So anywhere we go, I'm like looking to try to find someone who's a minority, and I can't find a single person. So I get a lot of stares, and it's fine, like I'm used to it, but Kuba and I always crack up because the second I start talking, everyone turns around to see who's talking, but that's just how it is. In Krakow, you would hear so many different languages there. You would hear more foreign languages than you would Polish walking around the city because it's such a tourist destination. We're almost done. As a non-EU citizen married to an EU citizen, have you ever been visited by immigration officials who wanted to check if your marriage was legit? So when I applied for the temporary residency permit, we were interviewed then, separately. I believe the purpose of those interviews was just to ensure that we were in a legit marriage and that we were living together in the flat that we had rented in Krakow. We were told that we would need someone to translate for me because I don't speak Polish. So Kuba just figured that, oh, he will just translate for me. But then when we showed up, they were like, oh no, you can't do that because we have to be separated. And they want to make sure that, like, we have an unbiased translator. So then we had to reschedule and hire a translator to do that. But it was totally fine. Yeah, it's only that one time that they did that. So we haven't had any other problems. And last question. Are you missing living in the States, and if so, what aspects? Are you missing your family and friends? Sometimes I do miss the diversity there. That's something that I don't see at least in this part of Poland. But that's something that you can find in larger cities in Europe. Like in Krakow. Krakow is a very diverse city. Like, for instance, one thing I look for in cities is like whether they have like an Asian shop or like an Indian market, something like that, or like a Middle Eastern shop, and Krakow had those things, so that was great. Here, you don't find anything like that. Yeah, so that also reminds me about Mexican food. I talk about this a lot with Cuba, where I'm just like, oh man, I could totally go for some Mexican food, like real Mexican food, but that's something that you cannot find. So I don't miss living in the States. I'm happy to be living abroad, and I did a video where I talked about like what a culture shock it was for me to go back to the States for the first time after I was living abroad for 2.5 years when I went back for the first time. So I much prefer living here than living there. I do miss my family and friends, but like my relationship with them, it's always been like this, where it's like I'm never living in the same place for too long. I've always moved around. I've just gotten used to that, where I see them when I can see them, and then in between, we might chit-chat here and there, or we might not speak at all, but that's just how it is, so that's just how our relationships are. But thank you so much for watching, and feel free to ask more questions on this video, and I will get to them in a later Q&A.